What if, on the coldest night of your life, a little girl looked into your eyes and whispered, "Can you take her instead of me?" Would you walk away, or would you risk everything to protect a child you had never met? This is not just a story about wealth, power, or loss. It is about the moment a millionaire, CEO, hollow from success, and broken by loneliness, stumbled upon two frightened sisters in a dark parking garage. One question, one desperate plea, shattered the walls around his heart and set into motion a journey that would change all of their lives forever. Tonight, we invite you to step inside a tale of courage, sacrifice, and unexpected family. Because sometimes, love finds us in the darkest corners. Stay with us, and if you believe in stories that heal, inspire, and restore hope, subscribe now to the Retold Stories. The garage was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed down on Andrew Blake's shoulders as he walked toward his car. His polished shoes struck the wet cement with hollow echoes, each step a reminder of how alone he truly was. For years, he had been the last man out of the office, wearing exhaustion like a badge of honor. But tonight, the emptiness of his life cut deeper than the ache in his bones. The skyscraper he had built his empire in no longer felt like a monument to success. It felt like a tomb. He told himself he was only tired, that the heavy weight in his chest was nothing more than fatigue from another endless day of deadlines and boardroom battles. Yet, as he reached the far end of the garage, a sound shattered his practiced indifference. At first it was faint, almost fragile, the kind of noise you could mistake for the groan of pipes or the hum of machinery. But then he heard it again, the broken, uneven whimper of a child trying not to cry. Andrew froze. His breath caught. He scanned the rows of parked cars, the shadows flickering under harsh fluorescent lights. The world around him narrowed to the sound, pulling him toward a corner where two small shapes huddled together. As he stepped closer, his heart pounded in a way it hadn't in years. Crouched against the cold concrete wall were two little girls. The older one, no more than 7, sat with her arms wrapped tightly around a smaller figure, a girl of 4, trembling in her grasp. Their clothes were thin, their shoes soaked, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. The older girl's eyes, wide and blue, stared at him with a sharpness far too old for her age, a kind of raw, adult fear that made Andrew's throat tighten. He knelt a few feet away, careful not to startle them. His voice softened, instinctively gentler than the one he used in boardrooms. "Hey," he said quietly, "are you hurt? Do you need help?" The older girl didn't answer. Instead, she held her sister closer, her gaze locked on his as though measuring every ounce of his intent. The younger one buried her face against a faded stuffed rabbit, her tiny shoulders shaking. Andrew's chest ached. He tried again, lowering his tone to a whisper. "It's okay. My name is Andrew. I work here. Do you know where your parents are?" For a long, breathless moment, there was only silence. Then the older girl's lips parted, and the words that slipped out struck him like a blow to the chest. "Can you take her instead of me?" Andrew's stomach twisted. He blinked, not sure he had heard correctly. What do you mean?" The girl's chin trembled, her voice breaking as she spoke again. "Please take Sophie. She's the good one. She never gets in trouble. Just don't let him find her." Andrew's world tilted. In his 40-some years, he had weathered corporate wars, lawsuits, and betrayals, but nothing had pierced him like that fragile plea. A child, offering herself as a sacrifice to save her little sister. His instincts screamed to call security, to dial the police, to shove this heartbreak back into the shadows where it belonged. But his legs wouldn't move. He couldn't leave them. A memory flickered in his mind. His mother, long gone now, sitting at his bedside when he was small. She had whispered that the world could be unfair, cruel even, but that kindness mattered most when you least expected it. He remembered the warmth of her hand on his hair, the way she had made him believe, if only for a moment, that he was safe. Andrew drew a shaky breath and steadied himself. "No one is going back anywhere tonight," he said softly. "Not you, not Sophie. Both of you are coming with me." The older girl blinked at him, disbelief flickering across her tired eyes. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Yes," Andrew replied firmly. "I do. Carefully, slowly, He shrugged off his expensive coat and draped it over their small shoulders. The fabric swallowed them whole, but the warmth it carried seemed to ease the tightness in their posture. The little one Sophie peeked up at him, her lips trembling, and for the first time he saw something fragile and luminous in her gaze: hope. He reached out his hand, and after a long hesitation, the older girl placed her tiny fingers in his. Her name, he soon learned, was Emily. Together they walked toward the elevator, Sophie cradled against Andrew's chest, Emily clinging to his hand as though it was the only anchor she had left in the world. When they reached his penthouse, the contrast was almost unbearable. The sprawling apartment gleamed with marble and glass, priceless art on the walls, furniture curated for appearances rather than comfort. Yet in the middle of all that luxury, the girls looked impossibly small, perched on the edge of a couch too large for their slight frames. Andrew tried offering them juice, snacks, anything that might resemble normalcy. Sophie nibbled at a cracker. Silent. Emily didn't touch a thing. He set up blankets and pillows, turned the heat up as high as it would go. When he offered to call someone, Emily shook her head so violently that he stopped himself from pressing. Instead, he sat across the room, keeping his distance but refusing to leave. He watched as Emily curled around her sister, protective, even in sleep. Sophie's small breaths evened out, her hand clinging to the stuffed rabbit, while Emily's eyes remained wide open, staring out at the city lights, as though the skyline itself might turn into a threat. Andrew stayed awake too, listening to the faint hum of the city, the quiet rise and fall of Sophie's chest, the stubborn defiance in Emily's posture. Something inside him shifted that night. The empty rituals of his old life, microwave dinners, lonely boardrooms, hollow victories, suddenly felt meaningless. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about deals or deadlines. He was thinking about two children who had appeared in his life out of nowhere, two children who needed him in a way no one else ever had. And in that fragile, sleepless dawn, Andrew Blake realized that everything he thought he knew about success and failure, about what mattered and what didn't, had been overturned in the span of a single night. Morning crept into the penthouse, spilling light across marble floors that gleamed like a museum, not a home. Andrew Blake sat at the dining table, staring at his phone, its screen buzzing with unanswered calls. His legal team, his COO, his assistant, all warning him of risk, liability, scandal. Their words blurred together in his mind, meaningless compared to the sound of Emily's soft breathing as she sat nearby, her hand wrapped protectively around Sophie's. He had spent decades mastering control, shaping empires with iron focus. But here, in this cavernous apartment, control meant nothing. Two little girls had dismantled the walls he had built around himself with nothing more than a plea and a pair of frightened eyes. He moved clumsily around the kitchen, searching for food. The fridge was stocked with imported cheeses, fine wine, sparkling water, but nothing that felt like breakfast for children. He eventually found a box of cereal, fumbling as he poured it into bowls. The milk splashed, the cereal scattered across the counter, and Sophie startled at the sound, her eyes wide with fear. Andrew froze, realizing just how fragile the trust between them was. Slowly, carefully, he knelt beside her. "It's okay," he whispered. "Nobody's mad. We're just figuring this out together." Something shifted. Sophie reached out, her tiny hand curling around his finger for only a second, but the warmth of that touch radiated through him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. That afternoon, he sat with Emily at the dining table as she drew pictures in a notebook. The lines were shaky, hesitant, but deliberate. He asked gently, "Do you know where your mom is?" Emily's pencil slowed. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "She's not here. She got hurt." Andrew's heart clenched. "And your dad?" She shook her head. "We don't have one, just Mom. But Rick came," he yelled. He said if she didn't pay, he'd take Sophie. The words twisted in Andrew's chest like a blade. He had fought ruthless competitors, but he had never confronted this kind of cruelty. He knew nothing about raising children, but he knew about monsters who took what wasn't theirs. For the first time, his millions, his power, his polished titles felt useless. What mattered now was keeping these girls safe. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Janice, his COO, her voice tight with urgency. "Andrew, you can't keep them. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Call Child Services before it's too late." He looked at Emily's face, pale and fragile, her eyes darting to the window at every sound. He hung up before Janice could finish. Instead, he made a list. Warm clothes, shoes, toothbrushes, toys, Tate. He slipped out during lunch, wandering the aisles of a big box store like a stranger in a foreign land. Parents moved through the rows with practiced ease, tossing items into carts while their children tugged at their sleeves. Andrew, in his tailored suit, felt like an alien. He filled his cart with anything that might help: socks with cartoon animals, pink mittens, juice boxes, mac and cheese, a rainbow of markers. None of it seemed enough, but it was something. When he returned, the girls were curled up on the couch watching cartoons. Sophie's thumb rested against her lips, her small body heavy with sleep. Emily sat upright, her eyes still cautious but less sharp than before. Andrew handed her the notebook and markers. "For you," he said. "For drawing. Or writing. Whatever you want." For the first time, Emily's gaze softened. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Andrew attempted macaroni and cheese. The sauce nearly burned, Sophie spilled her milk, and Emily tried to clean up with two small hands. Instead of frustration, laughter bubbled out of him. Unsteady, but real. A millionaire CEO crouched on the floor wiping up milk, trying to earn the trust of two children who had known too much fear. It was ridiculous. It was humbling. And it mattered more than any boardroom victory he had ever claimed. Later, when the girls settled under blankets, Emily turned to him, her voice trembling. "Are you going to send us away?" The question pierced him. He shook his head firmly. "No, not unless you want to go." Relief flickered across her face, quickly hidden, but he saw it. She curled up next to Sophie, her small hand clutching her sister's arm, as though anchoring them both to the only safety they had known in days. Andrew stayed awake long after they drifted off, sitting in the darkened room. His old life felt like another planet, contracts, deadlines, empty penthouse parties. Here, in the quiet, with two small figures breathing softly under his roof, he realized something had shifted. The next morning, he called Monica Reyes, a trusted friend in the police department. His voice was hesitant as he explained everything: the garage, the plea, the threats, the girl's fear. Monica listened quietly, then spoke with steady warmth. "Drew, this is messy. But if these girls are really in danger, you did the right thing. Send me what you know. Names, details, a picture if you have it." Emily handed him a faded photograph of her, Sophie, and their mother, Julia Grace. Andrew's heart caught at the sight of Julia's weary smile in the picture, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughters. He snapped a photo with his phone and sent it to Monica. Hours later, Monica called back. "I found her. Julia Grace. She's alive. She's in the county hospital. Hit and run, 4 days ago. She's been there under a false name, no ID. But she's alive." Andrew didn't hesitate. He bundled the girls into his car, telling them gently, "We're going to see someone special." Emily's eyes widened, hope battling with fear. Sophie clutched her locket tight against her chest. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and despair. Fluorescent lights buzzed, voices echoed, and the sterile walls seemed to press in on all sides. Monica met them at the elevator, ushering them past security. When they entered Julia's room, Emily froze at the doorway. Her mother lay pale and battered against white sheets, her hair tangled, her face bruised. For a heartbeat, Emily stood still, then she rushed forward, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mommy," she whispered. Julia stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze landed on her daughters, and her lips curved in the faintest smile. Her hand, weak but determined, reached for Emily. Sophie climbed onto the bed, pressing herself into her mother's side. Julia couldn't speak, but her trembling fingers told the story. She had held on for them. Andrew stood back, feeling like an intruder in a sacred moment. Julia's eyes shifted to his, wet with gratitude. Her lips formed silent words. "Thank you." He stepped closer, his voice unsteady. "I'll keep them safe until you can." For a long moment, Julia's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. It was a fragile promise, born in the quiet hum of machines and the desperate love of a mother for her children. Andrew felt it settle into his bones. That night, as the girls slept curled against Julia, Andrew sat by the hospital window. The city lights shimmered, but they no longer looked cold or indifferent. They looked alive. For the first time in years, he wasn't restless. He wasn't lost. He had a purpose. And he knew, with unshakable certainty, that nothing in his old world could compare to what he had found here. The storm rolled in from the Atlantic like a living thing, rattling windows and drenching the world outside in sheets of rain. Inside Andrew Blake's coastal retreat, the air was heavy with unease. Julia sat with her daughters close, trying to appear calm, but her eyes flickered constantly toward the windows. Emily double-checked the locks before bed. Sophie clung tighter to Andrew's arm whenever thunder cracked. No matter how warm the house felt, the shadow of Rick lingered like a ghost pressing against the glass. At first, it was only small things. A gray sedan, idling too long near the house, hang-up calls at odd hours, an envelope in the mailbox with a single word scrawled in black marker, "Soon." Each incident chipped away at the fragile peace they had begun to build. Julia's hands trembled as she prepared tea, whispering reassurances to the girls even as her voice shook. Andrew tried to stay strong, but at night he paced the halls, flashlight in hand, listening to every creak of the old wooden floors. Then came the night the lights went out. One moment, the house hummed with the quiet rhythm of evening Julia washing dishes, Sophie humming softly in the living room, Emily curled on the couch with a book. The next, everything was plunged into darkness. The refrigerator stopped humming. The television flickered off. The silence was sudden and absolute. Andrew's heart pounded in his ears. "Stay here," he said firmly, grabbing a flashlight. Julia followed him, her own flashlight trembling in her grip. When the power returned a minute later, something was wrong. A window in the guest room stood open, rain dripping onto the floor. Outside, muddy footprints trailed across the back porch. Julia's voice cracked as she whispered, "It's him." Andrew's hand shook as he texted Monica one word, "Now." He ushered Julia and the girls into her bedroom, barricading the door with a dresser. He sat in front of the door with a heavy flashlight clenched in his fist, every muscle tight with dread. The storm battered the house, wind howling, rain lashing at the glass. Every sound felt like an intrusion, every shadow like a threat. Then, just after midnight, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the storm. Julia froze, her arms wrapped around her daughters. Emily buried her face in her mother's lap. Sophie whimpered, her whole body trembling. Andrew stood, his chest tight, and stepped toward the front door. "Who is it?" he demanded. The answer was a voice he had only heard described before, smooth, mocking, poisonous. "You know who at Island. You can't keep them from me forever." Andrew's grip on the flashlight tightened. "You're not welcome here. The police are on their way." Rick laughed, the sound low and humorless. "They're mine. You know it." His silhouette shifted against the frosted glass. Then the pounding began fist against wood, rattling the lock, shaking the frame of the door. Julia clutched her daughters, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe. I've got you," though her voice broke with fear. Andrew stood his ground, adrenaline surging, his body a barrier between the man outside and the family behind him. Blue lights cut through the calm. Storm. Sirens wailed. Monica's voice boomed over the rain. "Police, step away from the house." Rick turned to run, but Monica and her partner were already there. They tackled him in the yard, pinning him face down in the mud as lightning split the sky. Julia sobbed with relief, collapsing against the girls. Andrew unlocked the door and let Monica inside, his chest heaving with the release of fear he hadn't realized he was holding. "It's over," he whispered, gathering Emily and Sophie into his arms. "You're safe. I won't let him hurt you, ever again." The next weeks blurred with legal battles. Courtrooms with high ceilings and polished wood became the new battleground. Andrew, once a master of contracts and negotiations, now found himself fighting for something infinitely more valuable: safety, peace, the right for two little girls to sleep without nightmares. The evidence stacked high: threatening notes, hospital records, Monica's police report, Julia's testimony. Rick sat handcuffed, his lawyer's words weak against the mountain of proof. Julia spoke with a trembling voice that grew stronger as she went on. "My girls deserve peace. They deserve to feel safe. We're not running anymore." When the judge delivered the ruling, the gavel struck like thunder. Rick was found guilty on multiple counts: child endangerment, attempted kidnapping, assault. The sentence was long. No parole, no contact. Julia's breath left her in a sob of relief. Emily clutched Sophie's hand so tightly their knuckles whitened. Monica smiled faintly, tears bright in her eyes. After the trial, Andrew returned with Julia and the girls to the beach house. It no longer felt like a hideout. It felt like a home. Slowly, the tension began to lift. Sophie painted seashells with Julia, giggling as the waves lapped at the shore. Emily practiced riding her bike, with Andrew steadying her from behind, her laughter bright as the wind. The house filled with drawings, laughter, and the ordinary mess of family life. Socks on the floor, cookies cooling in the kitchen, music playing from Julia's phone. At night, when Sophie had nightmares, Emily climbed into bed with her and whispered stories until she drifted back to sleep. Andrew often listened from the hallway, his chest aching, but when Emily's eyes met his, she no longer looked alone. One evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, Julia sat beside Andrew on the porch, her voice quiet but steady. "Thank you, not just for saving us, for letting us save you too." Andrew looked at her, at the girls chasing fireflies in the yard, and realized she was right. He had saved them from fear, but they had saved him from emptiness. He had given up his old life, but what he had gained was something money could never buy. The storm that once threatened to tear everything apart had passed. What remained was a family, fragile, unexpected, unbreakable. And for the first time in his life, Andrew Blake wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. For Andrew Blake, that moment came in a dim parking garage when a little girl whispered a plea no child should ever have to make: "Can you take her instead of me?" From that single sentence, an entire world shifted. Andrew, a man who had measured his worth in stock prices and skyscrapers, discovered that true wealth was not written in balance sheets. It was found in the fragile trust of a child's hand reaching for his, in the trembling gratitude of a mother who thought hope was gone, in the laughter of two sisters who learned how to feel safe again. The journey was not easy. Storms raged, both outside and within. There were nights filled with fear, battles in courtrooms, moments when it seemed the shadows would always win. But love, unexpected, uninvited, undeniable, proved stronger. It transformed a sterile penthouse into a sanctuary, a coastal retreat into a home, and a lonely man into something he had never been before, a father in every way that mattered. Julia healed not only from her injuries, but from years of silence, reclaiming her voice and purpose. Emily and Sophie, once shivering in the dark, began to paint their world in color again. Drawings taped to walls, seashells scattered across windowsills, laughter echoing where fear once lived. And Andrew, who had once dreaded quiet nights, found himself cherishing them, listening to the steady rhythm of little breaths, and realizing he no longer had to face the darkness alone. This story is not just about one man's choice to protect two girls. It is about the truth that sometimes family is not the one you are born into, but the one you fight for. It is about how the smallest acts of courage, wrapping a coat around shivering shoulders, kneeling to wipe up spilled milk, whispering, "You're safe now," can alter the course of a life. And maybe, if you are listening closely, you feel it too. The reminder that even in our coldest nights, love can find us. It may come in fragile whispers, in storm-tossed nights, in laughter we thought we had lost forever. But when it comes, it changes everything. Here, at the Retold Stories, we believe in sharing these moments not to escape the world, but to remember the power we carry within it. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you of the strength of kindness, the beauty of second chances, or the resilience of love, Then stay with us. There are more stories waiting, stories that heal, that inspire, that remind us we are never truly alone. Subscribe to the Retold Stories today, and let your heart be part of a family that believes in hope.